Echoes of February. Vasilisa walked through the crisp, snow-blanketed streets of St. Petersburg, her thoughts still tangled in the haunting notes of the choir's song. She had attended the concert with a friend's recommendation, expecting little more than a quiet evening, but the music had pulled her into a trance. Now, wandering past the glow of the city lights and the decorated windows, she felt as if she were in another world entirely. When she reached the bookstore, its warm light stood out against the snowy night. Without a second thought, she stepped inside, dusted the snow from her coat, and made her way to her favorite section, books on history and revolution. It was here, surrounded by the stories of past struggles and dreams of freedom, that she felt most at home. She reached out and picked up an old memoir by Maurice Paléologue, the French diplomat who had witnessed the early days of the February Revolution. Her heart raced as she flipped through its pages, soaking in the names and events that felt as familiar to her as friends. Kerensky, the provisional government, the feverish hopes for freedom. It all resonated with her, a reminder of a time when change seemed possible. As she lingered over the book, a gentle hand touched her arm. Vasilisa turned surprised, and met the gaze of a girl with a warm smile and sharp eyes. "You look like you're in another world," the girl said with a grin. "Is Paléologue's diary that good?" Vasilisa couldn't help but smile back. It's like I can feel that world still alive here in this city. I know it's strange, but I just get drawn in." The girl laughed softly. "Well, if you're going to lose yourself in history, that's a pretty good place to start. But are you one of those who loves the February days and can't stand October?" Vasilisa shrugged. "The February Revolution feels like hope, you know? Before everything became complicated. I don't know if that makes sense." "It does," the girl said, leaning against the shelf. "I'm Irina, by the way. I work here. Guess I should have started with that." They shared a laugh, and Vasilisa felt the warmth of an unexpected connection. Irina's curiosity felt like an invitation to be open, to share the thoughts that usually stayed hidden in her mind. "You know, we're closing soon, but there's a cafe down the street that serves the best pishki," Irina said, smiling as she closed the book gently in Vasilisa's hands. "I'd love to hear more about why you like the February Revolution so much." Vasilisa hesitated only a moment before agreeing. Irina's enthusiasm made her feel lighter, as though her interests weren't peculiar or outdated, but rather something worth celebrating. They left the bookstore together, the snow crunching under their feet, the lights of the city twinkling all around them. In the cozy cafe, over steaming mugs of tea and warm pishki, they spoke for hours, sharing stories of history and dreams of change. Vasilisa felt a flicker of excitement she hadn't known in a long time. A new companionship that felt as real as the revolutionary ideals she cherished. And as the night stretched on, St. Petersburg became their own little world. A place where hope could be born anew in the quiet, snow-filled streets, and where two souls found solace in each other's presence. The cafe was warm and fragrant, a little bubble of comfort amid the frosty night outside. Vasilisa sat across from Irina, who leaned forward intently as they talked. Despite the hour, the small space hummed with quiet laughter and murmured conversation. Vasilisa felt herself relaxing, her guardedness melting with each word. "Tell me more about why you're so fascinated with this period," Irina said, her eyes bright. "I mean, it's not often I meet someone who's so passionate about something as specific as February 1917. Vasilisa laughed, a bit self-conscious but intrigued by Irina's openness. "I think it's about possibility," she said slowly, her fingers tracing circles on her mug. "It's that moment before everyone knew how everything would turn out. Before October came, before Stalin and the purges. February was just ordinary people fighting for something better. daring to dream of change. Irina nodded. And it feels close, doesn't it? Like you could just reach back and touch it. Exactly. Vasilisa couldn't hide her smile. There's a sense that if only the provisional government had succeeded, Russia might have become something else entirely. Or maybe something similar to what it is now, Irina said thoughtfully, stirring her tea. But we'd like to think it could be different. Vasilisa pondered this. She usually preferred not to argue, especially about her ideals, but Irina's perspective was disarming, intriguing. She didn't seem intent on challenging Vasilisa's beliefs. She simply wanted to understand them. What about you? Vasilisa asked, watching Irina with curiosity. You're clearly interested in history too. Why work in a bookstore? Irina chuckled, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. Well, it's a mix of passion and convenience. I'm a literature student, so it pays the bills, and I get to be surrounded by stories all day. But I love history, especially the parts that get forgotten, and the people who get lost in it. Their conversation wove in and out of history, books, and their own lives. Vasilisa found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected, sharing not only her fascination with the revolution, but also small details about her own life. She told Irina about her love for the quiet parts of St. Petersburg, the hidden courtyards and old street lamps, places that felt untouched by time. By the time they realized the cafe was closing, they had spent hours talking. Irina looked a little surprised but pleased. I don't usually talk this much with people, she admitted, pulling on her coat as they prepared to leave. But with you it just felt easy. Vasilisa's cheeks flushed. I feel the same way. They stepped out into the snow-covered street, their breaths visible in the cold air. Vasilisa felt the chill seeping through her coat, but there was a warmth inside her that kept her from noticing. Would you like to meet again? Irina asked, tucking her hands into her pockets and giving Vasilisa a hopeful look. Maybe we could check out some of the historical sites you mentioned. I'd love to see the city through your eyes. Vasilisa smiled, nodding. I'd like that. They exchanged numbers, and after a lingering goodbye, Vasilisa watched as Irina disappeared down the street. She stood there a moment, feeling a strange mix of excitement and calm, a sense that something new and significant had entered her life. As she walked back to her dorm, Vasilisa felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the layers she wore. She thought of the courage of those February days, the fragile yet powerful dreams that had defined a movement. Maybe, just maybe, she thought, such moments weren't only reserved for the past. The next few days were marked by an odd buoyancy Vasilisa couldn't shake. Thoughts of Irina drifted through her mind at unexpected moments, while flipping through her textbooks, watching the snow dust the rooftops from her dorm window, or wandering through the city. There was an ease she felt with Irina, a kind of recognition. She'd known a handful of people who shared her passion for history, but none who listened so intently or challenged her ideas with such warmth and curiosity. Their next meeting came on a Saturday afternoon. The sky was a pale gray, hinting at snow, as Vasilisa waited outside the city's historical museum, her cheeks tingling in the cold air. When Irina arrived, bundled up in a bright scarf, she greeted Vasilisa with a smile that was both shy and familiar, as though they'd been friends for much longer. Inside, they wandered through rooms filled with artifacts and memorabilia. Vasilisa felt her usual thrill as they passed displays on the provisional government, but today she found herself more aware of Irina's reactions than the exhibits themselves. Every now and then, she'd catch Irina looking at her thoughtfully, as though she were studying her rather than the history around them. When they reached a section on the February Revolution, Irina tilted her head, gesturing at a faded banner displayed in a glass case. "Look at this," she said, her voice soft. Isn't it strange to think that ordinary people once carried these banners through the streets, demanding change? And yet, here it is, carefully preserved but almost silenced. Vasilisa nodded, feeling that familiar ache, the bittersweet thrill of seeing remnants of the past. It's like a quiet monument to people who dared to hope for something better, she said. I always wonder what they would think of the world today. Irina looked at her, something flickering in her gaze. And do you think you'd be among them? If you'd been alive then, would you have walked in those demonstrations? The question caught her off guard. I'd like to think so, Vasilisa said after a pause. But maybe I'm more of a dreamer than a doer. Irina's smile was reassuring. Dreamers are what revolutions are built on. The rest is just following through. They lingered there, each lost in her own thoughts. Finally, Irina broke the silence. You know, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Being here with you, seeing how deeply you feel for this time and these people, it makes me feel a little more alive. Vasilisa glanced at her, surprised by the vulnerability in her words. I feel the same way, she murmured, her cheeks warm despite the chilly room. It's rare to find someone who understands. The museum closed around them, the lights dimming as the last visitors trickled out. They stepped outside together, into a world dusted with fresh snow. Without thinking, Vasilisa reached for Irina's hand, and though it was cold, it felt warm and steady in her grasp. Let's keep walking, Irina said, a hint of laughter in her voice. The city looks too beautiful to go home just yet. They wandered through St. Petersburg as evening settled over the streets, the golden glow of street lamps illuminating the snow. It felt like stepping back in time, as though they were the only two souls in the world. For a moment Vasilisa stopped, looking at Irina under the lamplight. I think, she said softly, I think I want to keep exploring with you. Not just history but whatever this is. Us. Irina smiled, her eyes bright with understanding. I'd like that too. And as they stood there hand in hand, Vasilisa felt, for the first time in a long while, that maybe she was exactly where she was meant to be.